Hello, everyone. Thank you for choosing to join us today for our online service from the Bridge Community Church. Today we are starting a new series called Become. Kevin talked about this series last week, and today Kevin's going to be bringing his message, and he's going to be doing the introduction to this series. I'm really looking forward to this and encourage you to follow along with us on this series. And as we look at how Peter grew in his faith and the challenges for us to be growing likewise. Today as well, Kelly White and Sarah Lawrence will be bringing some music to us. Reminder to Bridge kids that if you want to do church at home, just go to our website and follow the links to find the church services that fit your age or grade that's best for you. And I just want to take this moment just to update you on where we are in relation to COVID and the response to the government expanding things this week. It's been a full week for me, just in meetings, trying to figure out how we respond to this. I know on Monday I was working in my office here and started getting text messages and some emails and some phone calls about whether or not we'd have church this Sunday, and I was taken aback. I didn't know what was going on. And then my wife texted me and said that the Premier Ford had just announced that churches could open up to 30% capacity. So we had several meetings this week, meetings with staff, meetings with our elders and with deacons, and we kicked around the idea of starting to open again next week. But we have decided that for the summer, we are going to keep things as is. We're going to keep our service online, and we're going to wait and see what happens leading up to the fall. And as soon as we want to open, we want to gather again, but we want to make sure that it is the best time. And so because of everything that we talked about and looked at, we had considered starting, but as I said, we are going to wait until the fall. And so for the remainder of the summer, our service will continue to be online, but we are going to take advantage of the expansion in groups of people, of meeting more than 5 to 10. And again, there's no pressure for anybody, but what we're doing is we're going to leverage our small groups. And I know an email went out about that. I've already had several people contact me about getting connected, about taking advantage of a small group, and we're going to have our small groups meet throughout the summer. And each small group will decide how they're going to handle this. I know one small group is meeting Sunday, like today, when most of you are watching this, and they're going to watch the service together and then have lunch. And just an opportunity for them to connect and just encourage each other. So that each group will figure out what they're going to do. And we're also going to be looking at starting some new groups as people have contacted me. So I just ask you to stay tuned, and more information is going to be coming. And again, if you would like to be connected in a small group, just email me, steve@thebridgebancroft.ca, so that I can hopefully get you connected in a group. So yeah, it's been a full week. It's actually Friday night when I'm recording this, and normally I'm recording this on Wednesday, but just with everything that's happening, everything got pushed back. So anyway, again, thank you for choosing to join us today. And as always, as I sincerely pray for these online services, my hope and desire, as I've said most weeks, and I say again, is that through this online service today, you will be encouraged, you will be strengthened in your faith, and that God will use this in a very powerful and meaningful way in your life. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that He should give His only Son, gracefully broken. My heart stands in awe of your name, your mighty love stands strong to the end. You will fulfill your purpose for me. You won't forsake me. You will be with me. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. All to Jesus now, all to Jesus now, holding nothing back, holding nothing back. I surrender, I surrender, I surrender, I surrender. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken. Here I am, God, arms wide open, pouring out my life, gracefully broken.
Hey, good morning, everybody. We are kicking off our series called Become. And we are really excited about this series. Steve and I have been talking about this series for a period of time. And the reason we are so excited about this series is because it addresses so many questions that you and I have about our faith or about our spiritual journey. And as we go through this series, we're going to have some answers for how do I know what my calling is? Or how do I know if I'm even saved? The series is really, really good for us who have questions. And the reason it's good for us who have questions is because this series is focused around a period of time in Peter's life where he grew up spiritually. Some of us have questions about how come I'm not, I'm a Christ follower. How come I struggle in certain ways? I should be more mature than I am. But when you look at the life of Peter, we look at a journey where he walked with Jesus for a period of 3 years, and over those 3 years, he grew up. and even at the end of it, he had some growing to do. So when we look at this and we look around at other people who we think should be more mature than they are as Christians, and we wonder why they aren't, this is going to be a good series for us to look at what it takes to grow up spiritually. Looking at the life of Peter, if we're going to understand what Peter is saying to us and how Peter grew up in his faith, we need to understand where Peter started. And Peter is this really interesting guy. He is this fisherman. He's tough. He's rugged. For you to be a fisherman in the period of time that Peter is a fisherman, you would need to be gutsy because you would go out on the Sea of Galilee. In the Sea of Galilee, you can read about this on one of the occasions when Jesus is with his disciples, the time when Jesus walks on the water. A storm came up so quickly on the Sea of Galilee, and that would be the history that Peter would have experienced on the Sea of Galilee. He had to be gutsy to be a fisherman because he could get out there and get lost at sea. There's a really good chance that Peter is illiterate. Because of his role as a fisherman, he probably didn't get a big education. Although that could be questioned because of his connection with John the Baptist. We're not really sure. By the time that Jesus talks to Peter, by the time Jesus pursues Peter, he's probably about 30 years old. He's married. He probably has kids. He has built himself a business. And then Jesus comes along and calls him into something else. Now, he may have been searching for something else because we read about how he is connected with John the Baptist. But maybe he was just visiting his brother Andrew when he was with John the Baptist and found Jesus there. And he followed for a short period of time, or maybe only a day. And then we catch up with Peter when Jesus calls him on from the shores of Sea of Galilee after this first miraculous catch of fish. He becomes a very dominant leader within the church. Peter's name is actually mentioned almost 200 times in the New Testament, and many of those times it records what Peter is doing wrong. Peter is one of these guys that just says what's on his mind, and sometimes his mind isn't in the right place. But you gotta love Peter for that. Now, Peter, what he writes down for us, or what he has somebody else write down for us in 2 Peter chapter 1, is so powerful for us because we believe, is writing about his own journey, the things that he grew up in while he was walking with Jesus, how he added to his faith. He started with faith and then added goodness. Let's read the passage that we're going to be focusing on over the next couple of months. It starts off in verse 3 of 2 Peter chapter 1. It says, "His divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. Through these he has given us his very great and precious promise, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature." Think about that for a second. That you may participate in the divine nature. We'll come back to that. "Having escaped the corruption of the world caused by evil desires. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness mutual affection, and to mutual affection love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. But whoever does not have them is nearsighted and blind, forgetting that they have been cleansed from their past sins." So as we start off reading through this passage, the very first thing that Peter says to us, starting back at verse 3, he says, "His divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life." If you don't start there, if you question your ability to be a Christ follower, then you aren't grasping the power of God. Now, we all question whether we've got what it takes. Peter says, if you are a Christ follower, you have what it takes. It doesn't matter what your background is, where you were born. It doesn't matter what you do or whether you can read or whether you can't. It doesn't matter if you're highly educated or not educated at all. It doesn't matter what family you were born into or what country you live in. If you are a Christ follower, you have what it takes to do everything that God calls you to do. You have everything you need for a godly life. Not because of your own abilities, but because of your connection with God. We carry on. Verse 4, we break this down. Verse 4 says, "So that through them you may participate in the divine nature." That is so incredibly deep if you stop and think about it. The very fact that God has given you everything you need for a godly life, and because He has given you everything, all of these things that he has given you, they allow you to participate in the divine nature. You attain the nature of God, an understanding of God, the purpose of God. That is, it is incredible. It changes our understanding from God versus us, or the difference between God and us. It changes that thinking into God through us. The very fact that we become more like the nature of God. It's incredible. The body, soul, spirit nature of God flowing through the body, soul, spirit nature of us. It's incredible. Peter carries on. In verse 5, he says, "For this very reason, make every effort." Make every effort. The calling on our lives is huge, but it doesn't just come to us. It's actually us that makes this happen. We have to make an effort to engage in the things that Peter's going to talk to us about in order that we can participate in the very nature of God. But it starts with us. We can't just sit back and expect it to happen. We need to step forward and make every effort. It doesn't just happen. It requires a focus and an effort. Pay attention to this. As we move forward over these next few weeks, we're not just giving you information. We are giving you the instructions of things that you need to do in order to grow in your faith. Peter tells us it doesn't just happen. Otherwise, he wouldn't tell us that we need to make every effort to make this true. But it doesn't just stop there as well. He carries on. In verse 8, he says, after he's listed the things that we're to do, he says, "For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure." Sometimes we look at our spiritual lives and we think, if I get to this point, I've arrived. Or we can look at people and think that they have arrived. Peter says, you never arrive. This is imperfect. And in this process, you will be imperfect. You aren't called to be perfect. Don't expect to be perfect. If Peter is telling us that we need to have this in increasing measure, it means that we need to continue to get better at this, which also means that we have never arrived. It also means that we're going to mess this up. We are going to be imperfect in this. We know it because Peter says you need to get better at this. Always get better at this. You will get it wrong, and you will get better. Understand that. This is a journey that God calls us into. It's not a destination that we can arrive at. It's about getting better at what we're doing. Because you will never arrive, and you will always mess up. Own it. Recognize that. And in this spiritual journey, work at having the qualities we're going to talk about in increasing measure, knowing that you're going to get it wrong, but you can make it better. Next, in verse 9, it says, "But whoever does not have them is nearsighted and blind, forgetting that they have been cleansed from their past sins." Isn't that huge? How many of us have questioned our faith? How many of us have questioned whether we are saved? Whether we are forgiven? Whether God will walk away from us? Do you want peace and confidence in the faith you have? Then do what Peter instructs us to do. But if you question this, if you forget that they have been cleansed from their past sins, if you forget that you have been cleansed from your past sins, if your past sins are holding you back, then you need to focus on the things that we're going to focus on in order to have confidence in the forgiveness that God has extended to you. I want you to join us over the next really 2 months as we become, not as we arrive, but as we become more confident in God's ability to work through us. That is where we're headed. Join us so that you may become more aligned with God's nature. That's a promise that Peter gives us as we go through the things he instructs us in. We will become more effective and productive in our knowledge of God. We will become more settled in God's forgiveness. And we will become more certain of God's calling on our lives if we focus on the things that Peter tells us to focus on, if we grow in our faith, if we add to our faith goodness. Some of us need to start by adding to us faith. Have you ever surrendered to God? Have you ever put your trust in Him? He calls you to have faith in Him. And so next week, Steve's going to talk to us about what that looks like. How Peter is called to follow Jesus long before he is ever asked to love Jesus. So, over the next few months, we are going through this series, Become. And may you join us and become everything that God has called you to be.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank Kelly and Sarah for sharing with us and helping us to focus on our relationship with God, to take a few minutes out of this day, the few minutes after another probably just crazy week for so many of us, to focus on God through music. Music is so powerful. And thank you, Kevin, for that message. And as I said earlier, I am really looking forward to this series. And I love, at the end of his message, I have the advantage of listening to these messages first. And I love how at the end of his message, Kevin listed those things that can happen as a result of us being focused on spiritual growth, this focus of becoming. And I just love that word, become, how we're becoming stronger, how we're becoming more like Christ. And this week, I just want to encourage you to take your Bibles and I want to encourage you to really focus on this passage, 2 Peter chapter 1, starting in verse 5. And I want you to read this. I want you to meditate on this. I'd encourage you to journal about this. And just as we go through these things, just ask yourself, how am I doing? If as we look next week and start with faith, is that evident in my life? Because that's the foundation that Peter lays everything on top of. The thought that came to me as I listened to Kevin's message was this, that once again, there's this tension that we face, that the gospel clearly presents, that Jesus clearly presents, that he never backed away from, that to follow him requires us to surrender. If we desire to become, it requires us to surrender. So as we close today, Kelly and Sarah are going to sing another song, and it's called. I want you to pay attention to the lyrics in this song, and I want this to be the prayer as we start this series, and I want you to reflect on this song as we close this off today. And the lyrics go like this. It's where would I run but to the throne of mercy? Where would I kneel but at this cross of grace? How great the love, how strong the hand that holds us. Beautiful, so beautiful. And so and the chorus goes like this. It says, so here I bow to lift you high. Jesus, be glorified. In all things, for all my life, I am yours, forever yours. So here I bow to lift you high. For these things to be evident in our lives, for these things to have the impact, will require surrender. It's for us to bow and to lift Jesus high in our lives, asking him through his Spirit to do this work. So thank you again for joining us. And Kevin, thank you for your message. And Kelly and Sarah, thank you again. And I want to encourage you to follow through this week. And as we begin next week by looking at faith. So this closing song, use it as a prayer. And we will see you next week.
Where would I run but to the throne of mercy? Where would I kneel but at this cross of grace? How great the